Hello and welcome to another amazing episode of TMC, where we are here to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving. Subscribe, click the like button, and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified when we upload a video every week. Today on TMC, we have special guests, Erwan and Alicia Davon with Kindling the Desire in Your Relationship.
I started supporting people in their relationships in 1995. I started doing it because my relationships prior to 1995 were a disaster, and my family life prior to that was a disaster. So I wasn't even surviving. I love surviving to thriving. That's great. My relationships weren't even surviving. I got a degree in psychology, and I took every workshop on the planet, and I eventually was teaching for a transformational organization. And then eventually I took a look at where did I want to support people, and it was romance. And it's been the ride of a lifetime.
How long have you guys been married?
We've been married, I think 12 years. We've been together for almost 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I met Erwan when he was 10 years into having founded our organization and teaching singles and couples how to have fabulous love lives. So I met him 10 years into that, and I joined him.
Let's jump right in and tell us the secret. What is the secret to a successful love life?
That's a great question. I love that you cut to the heart of it. But the real secret is presence, or consciousness, or being awake, or whatever spiritual or religious or new age or whatever tradition. People have different names for that. But that's the most important, because then we're happy, right? Being happy, not putting too much weight on the relationship, like she's got to make me happy. Just being happy, being alive, happy in myself, presence, life, consciousness has happiness in it. If we get to the dynamic in a relationship, I would say love is the most important. And if we go one step down from there to feminine and masculine, it gets juicier. Really her pleasure, I would say, is the most important. A romantic relationship is different from a friendship. It's a turned on relationship. If the woman's not juiced, if the woman's not turned on, if the woman's not having a good time, then I'm not having a good time. So if she's happy and turned on, and we're out at the restaurant, even if the restaurant sucks, then I feel good. I'm having a good time. We're eating hot dogs. It's amazing. So I would say her pleasure. And the only sort of thing I would say about that is not in some kind of castrated masculinity, new age kind of way. I'm not talking about that. Right. I'm talking, James Bond, like, he's really got his attention on the woman.
Alicia, you have anything you want to add?
Yes. Well, yes to everything that Erwan just said. Absolutely. I mean, when you're a man in a relationship with a woman, if you just find out what she wants and pay attention to her desires and give her those things or those experiences, you're golden. And then as a woman, if you're really paying attention to your own self, to your desires, to your pleasures, that's a good thing. I'm also going to answer the question a little differently, which is the secret to a successful love life is you open up your calendar and that there's lots of time and space for that love life. A lot of people, especially after they've been together for months and years, and maybe they have kids and jobs and life and everything, it's like you open up their calendar and there's no time for each other. So that's another secret.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would agree. I definitely agree. And so often we get caught up in everything that we have going on in life, and we get so busy and we forget to set time. When we put things in our calendars because they really matter to us. So that calendar space that you just talked about, setting time for the secret, or setting time for the love and creating love in your relationship, and that intimacy is definitely of the uttermost importance. what are some steps that you would give to a couple to unlocking their relationship potential?
The first one, once the time is set, and Shante, both you and Alicia, sort of put that in place. And if there's not that, there's nothing happening. Once you've got some time and you're committed, right? Like you're committed to the relationship, you got the time, you're going to do it. Then what do you do at that time? Well, you want to do things that are fun. Mm-hmm. So it could be a date night or this or that kind of stuff. But ultimately, what we find is the most fun is doing some kind of connecting, some kind of contact, especially if it has a physical component. Mm. It can be sexual or it can be non-sexual. Yeah. There's a set of touching practices that we give our students and our couples that we coach, which we have them do every day if possible. Some people only do it a couple of times a week, do whatever they do. But one person's laying down, one person's sitting up. Let's say the guy's sitting up, the woman's laying down. He has one hand on her heart, one hand on her abdomen. This is simple, right? This is not super complicated. But the minute you've got the time and you're on a couch or on the bed or on the floor and you're actually doing that, you've got some new age music on, you got some incense going, you just feel better. 75% of issues and problems just evaporate just by virtue of doing that kind of thing. Now that's the first of about 12 touching practices, and it ramps up all the way to extended orgasm. But, maybe we'll get to that later in the podcast.
If you picture yourself, you two or anybody who's listening, picture yourself going through your lives. Like this morning, I was up earlier than Erwan and I was doing stuff around the house. I'm in the kitchen and doing dishes, and I run over to the package place to drop something off, and I'm in a certain mode, right? Like a get it done kind of thing. Right. But luckily, if you open up our calendars, every morning at 9:15 is our pleasure time. Right. So I get to come in and leave all that stuff behind and walk downstairs and get back into bed with Erwan. And he described those touching practices really beautifully. Right. I start kind of got to revive him a little bit out of sleep, and one hand on his heart, one hand on his abdomen. And we're physically connected, and all that other logistical stuff just melts away.
Yeah. People step out of the relationship sometimes in out of integrity ways. Because they're not having fun with each other. No. Most relationships devolve into logistics, and it's really important to have that pleasure and that romance. That's what couples come together for in the first place. One way to say it that sometimes has it land for the couples we support is, they think oh no, I don't have time for it. It's we got to do all this work stuff. Of course, everybody has to work, or most people do anyway. And of course, we got to take care of the kids and all the rest of this kind of stuff. But people don't realize, divorce is expensive. It's really, really expensive, and the costs to children, are the family breakdown, the financial costs, right? So better to put first things first. Not to mention the health consequences, of being stressed or unhappy or not having pleasure or fighting. We don't think of that.
Right. So true. And that's amazing, because you guys are just talking about simple touch, and it's things that sometimes we don't think about, but it's those things that can be very settling for us. Just a simple touch, your spouse touching you on the back or touching you on your hand, and that connection. And I guess before you guys said it that way, I never even thought about that, because sometimes on your most stressful moment, your spouse that touch just changes everything. And not being intentional about that in those moments and creating time for that. I love that you said you guys have it scheduled. You have it scheduled, and it's every morning, 9:15, we're starting off with that touch and that intimacy and that togetherness. And I think that's amazing. I was thinking, how many couples do you guys talk to that find that challenging, that they're oh, we don't have time for that because we have so many other things in our lives. We don't have time for, to set it on the calendar. But then you explained it, Erwan, to say that If you don't make time for a divorce, it's even more expensive. Not to mention the collateral damage.
Right.
Yes.
Right. For example, this isn't related to relationship, but they put wealth before health, trading in, health for wealth. That's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
And on the scheduling thing, another thing that sometimes people feel, maybe people listening are like, scheduling pleasure time, it's supposed to be spontaneous. Well, you kind of have to ask yourself, do you want to have regular and more frequent scheduled pleasure time, or like maybe once in a while, not so often spontaneous?
Wow.
Great to schedule it. You have it to look forward to.
And the touching practices, there's 12 of them. Half of them are not sexual at all. It's just time for pleasure and contact and being together. You never push sex, right? But in that container, it tends to want to happen. I love what Alicia's saying about, people think it should be spontaneous. People aren't spontaneous about their tennis game or their Netflix time, or, like in the night, you watch Netflix or whatever. And then the, Fridays at noon, you play tennis. It's, the relationship deserves the same kind of deliberateness.
Wow, I love that. I love that. That definitely put it in context for us, because we probably have guests or people that are listening that would say the same thing, or just the normal mindset, like, why put it on the schedule? But we schedule the things that are important to us. So definitely.
Yeah. And I was even thinking about, I'm listening, and I remember Shante and I actually just celebrated 23 years. And
congratulations.
Thank you so much. But when we first got married, I mean, before we got married, when we were dating, I mean, it was a lot of touching and feeling going on. I mean, it was, and even, I mean, again, without even sex being involved, it was a lot of, holding hands and all these different things that later on into the marriage that we can really lose focus of. So, man, I really love this and being intentional about doing this.
Absolutely.
It's actually one thing. Every day when I leave, I kiss on the forehead. And she told me after doing it, like how it makes her feel. And so through that communication, it just made me start doing it more. I mean, so now it became intentional, because of, wow, I'm like, ooh, okay. A kiss on the forehead does that. Okay. And I kiss on the forehead every day. So yeah, that's just a good example of it. So.
Sure.
And that's a good example of communication. The fact that, Shante, you told Cedric that, it reinforces that. And, that's another thing that tends to fall out of relationships is communication, vulnerability. Interestingly enough, communication about the good stuff, how good that kiss on the forehead. Couples get kind of reserved around each other. Whereas when they're dating, we're all more like sort of free. When the other person's not locked down yet, we all kind of put our best foot first. It's marriage, that's the time to really put your best foot first.
Wow, that's good.
So while we're talking about touching, and we talked a lot about that touching not even being sexual touch, just connecting, right? So let's talk a little bit more about a couple being successful and increasing their chemistry between them. So what advice do you guys give to couples who are seeking to do that, to increase the chemistry between them?
Well, here's the interesting thing. So as this is typically, as people get further and further into relationship, we kind of communicate less and less. And it's funny because we're getting to know each other more and more over the years, right? Hitting milestones together, whether it's marriage and kids or the house, whatever. But we can get kind of shy about intimacy. And then our conditioning around sex and intimacy can come more to the forefront. Like, we were taught, some of us, like, oh, don't talk about sex, or, oh, don't say what you want. Don't be too much. All these funny messages go through our minds, and it can impact us. And really, we want to communicate more than we think, especially the good stuff, because it gives our partner the feedback, like, oh, okay, they like this. Or even if there's something you want to change a little bit, oh, this feels great. Would you lighten the pressure a little bit? It just gives reality on it.
And it's important, like, if you tell somebody, hey, communicate more, it's like telling somebody to learn Russian. It's like, yeah, that's a good idea, but like what, how, where, when,
what does that mean?
You know, so, you know, it's, you know, in these touching practices, let's say let's say woman's laying down, guy's sitting up, hand on abdomen, hand on heart. And the woman might say, wow, your hands feel really good, the way you did, Shante, to Cedric when he gave you that kiss on the forehead. So we just call that basically an approval. Now, maybe she wants, you know, both hands on her heart, you know, so she can get a nice grounding kind of thing. So she would give an approval and then a request, would you put both of your hands on my heart? And then he would do that. And then she would say, oh my God, that feels so relaxing, so settling, so grounding, that feels really good. So we call that the communication cycle. So approvals are one part of good communication. The communication cycle is another part, and it's how to ask for what you want and actually get it, which is approval, request, approval. Now, from the person sitting up, he might wonder, you know, what does she want? So the communication cycle for him from sitting up would simply be, would you like lighter touch? Would you like a deeper touch, a slower touch, like that? So we have couples practice the communication in the context of touching. And the exercises go from deep touch to, you know, kind of a more sensual touch, and to what we call a taking touch, the way you would pet a cat, a light touch, bringing up the energy. It can be a deep kind of grounding touch, can be more of an exciting sexual touch, then kind of going towards erogenous zones, and then the energy starting to really flow, and, you know, eventually get to clitoral stroking. Right. And that is missing in most couples' relationship. You know, it's the most sensitive part of her body. She's the heat source, you know, at least weekly. We get there daily, but we recommend couples get there at least weekly. And if you can communicate and touch in a non-sexual context, and then in a sexual context, it'll spill over really into all other areas. So that's why we focus on those touching practices so much.
And it gets easier as you do it more. So if you haven't been communicating in this way, maybe feels a little awkward at first, you just do it. And we make the communication cycle really simple, so it's easy to do.
Wow. I love this because it really, again, take off this whole guessing game. And I kind of want to touch on something Alicia said earlier. She said something about the feedback. And I was thinking about the feedback. And I know in relationships, people probably give this false feedback. You know, it's like, I really don't like it, but, you know, probably make a sound, a moaning sound or something to something you don't even like, because you don't want to make the individual feel bad. So let's talk about that. Why is that dangerous, or is it good?
That's great.
Feedback. Topic.
Yes. What you said is so great, because it shows how much we really care for the other person. You know, we don't want to hurt their feelings. And that's why the approval is so important. If you say something positive first before you give the feedback, it's disarming. It gives you much more room to then say whatever it is that you want.
It's much easier to not withhold and not lie if you're really loving and being friendly with the other person. So it's as much for the person receiving the communication. It's more for the person giving the communication than it is for the person receiving. You know, you went on a different, I like the line that you went on. I was going in a totally different direction. One of the great things about masculine and feminine relationships is the thinking is so different, you know, it's great. You know, it's really good. That's another secret of relationship. Like, let the guy have the masculine power, let the woman have the feminine power, you know, like often people are trying to get both.
Yes, and appreciate them both, you know, they both are strong.
But where I was headed with it was, you know, we did a topic, it wasn't last night, actually, it was the night before last in our main class, Mastery of Relationship, which we call the female decoder, you know, and there's a lot of reasons that women are not direct about what they want. You know, a lot of cultural reasons and cultural conditioning, and the culture is really hard on women. There's really a whole bunch of stuff going on there. So it's really important for guys to pay enough attention to understand, oh, you know, what is she saying? What does she want here? Because sometimes she's going to be direct and sometimes she's not going to be direct. And sometimes it's really good not to be direct. You know, like most women speak about sex in code, you know, and there's good reasons for that. You know, it kind of gives you an ability to escape if you want to say, like, nah, I changed my mind. You know?
Let me ask you this question. So how do you deal with a insecure spouse? So the husband may be insecure or the wife may be insecure, and you know this, and it's like, so what are some tips that we can practice to really maneuver around to that, to kind of give that sense of security back?
Yeah, I'll answer this since I'm an insecure spouse. You know, the most important quality in a relationship partner is their willingness to grow and develop. You know, you're better off with somebody like you both are growing and developing, your relationship coaches. You know, it's like you're dealing with things.
Yeah.
You know, we're not always succeeding at things. That's being a human being. None of us is ideal or, you know, perfect in that sense.
Right.
But if you have somebody who's dealing with things, who's learning and growing, that's a better prospective relationship partner than somebody who's doing pretty well, but they're not really growing.
Right.
You know, that's going to get old. That relationship is going to break down. So, you know, don't be your partner's coach, but make sure your partner, especially if they're insecure like me, has support. You know, I have a therapist, basically.
Sometimes we do that with our partner. Instead of allowing them to have what they need, we become the coach and we're trying to coach them. But if they have any issues, especially with insecurity, and many of us do in different areas, if they do, then you become like the teacher instead of the spouse that they're connecting with. And sometimes that doesn't always work well.
That's right.
Indeed. It's not the role that either person wants to be in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want to talk about how couples can succeed. How can couples succeed? We've talked about different things. We talked about feedback. We talked about a successful love life, but we want to talk a little bit about how couples can succeed at various stages in their relationships. Because Erwan, just like you just said, we know that we are always growing. We're always changing. I'm not the same person I was when we got married in 1998. He's not the same person. All the time, you're constantly growing and you're constantly changing. So there's various stages in our lives and in our marriages and in our relationships, period. So what are some ways that couples can navigate and succeed in various stages in their relationship?
Yes. Well, it's a set of skills, which is really good to know, because sometimes we go into relationship, we're newly dating somebody or we get married or whatever. We kind of think, oh, I should know all this. And we're kind of flying blind. And so Erwan and I have laid out a set of skills that help people in every stage of relationship succeed. All of the skills are really good in, let's say, a marriage. So there's skills, for example, when you're first getting into relationship, good to know how to flirt, you know, how to play, how to have fun, how to be light.
Yeah.
When you're getting into a more serious relationship, how to bring in vulnerability and share, you know, your life's vision or your deep fears and these and that, and how you feel about the person. Setting up your lifestyle to have time and space, learning sex skills to keep that novelty chemistry from the beginning going through the relationship. And then there's skills like commitment and knowing how to cherish the person, and sensual skills like extended orgasm. So having all of these skills, and I'm telling you, you don't want to leave the flirting and the play and the light back at the beginning, right? You want to keep
all the way through. Yeah.
Forward all the way through. So in our classes and in our coaching, we train couples in all of these different skills. So you have them. So you have a turned on relationship.
Alicia was great at the commitment skills. I was great at the let's have fun skills. if you divide it into kind of two halves, like vulnerability and fun, and it was scary. And I really had to learn about vulnerability and commitment. And, because my family of origin, it didn't work out.
Right.
So,
right.
I didn't have a model for that. She had a very stable family of origin. I have great in-laws, but, it wasn't that fun. It wasn't really kind of wild and extreme. You need some of that, craziness, to have a relationship that's really an eternal date or an adventure for all ages.
Erwan, I think it's great that you said that, because sometimes we don't keep that in mind, that we both come from different families of origin. We both come from different histories, different upbringings, and we saw different things displayed. And so one person could be stronger in one area and one set of skills, and the other person could be a little weaker in a certain area and a certain set of skills during the various stages. But being willing to learn is of the uttermost importance.
Absolutely.
Being intentional about learning as you grow through the various stages is important as well. Okay, you guys run a successful teaching business, right? You guys teach couples success, you teach romance, you teach intimacy, you teach couples things to help them, like we just talked about, through various stages in their marriage and in their relationship. So let's talk about that. How does that work? How can a couple be successful in business, in working together with their spouse?
Yeah.
Well, this is the area of most challenge in our relationship of all the areas. We have been working at it since we've been together. Because when we got together, we were dating. Erwan was my boyfriend, I was his girlfriend, but then I was also studying psychology. I was getting my master's degree. I was interested in working with people. And so I would visit the courses he was teaching. I got really interested in them. And then I just joined his organization. So I'm like, all right, baby, like, this is it. We're business partners and we're together too. So what we've learned, one of the biggest things we've learned, is designating your roles, like knowing who's doing what. And then you let each other do your roles and you support each other.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
So important, because the relationship dynamics, it's like when you're in an office and it's just boss employee or whatever. Mm-hmm. Those roles are so clear. It's usually not any more complicated than that. But when you're with your partner, you get extra triggered. So you got to really know who's doing what, and you respect each other's roles.
And then a practice that made a huge difference for us was we don't have any meeting. We teach together splendidly, but the meetings that we would have together just sucked. So we just canceled all the meetings, and then we just do it all by email. And that one little change made a huge difference, because the triggering just wasn't there.
Wow. So you're saying when you guys would have in-person meetings together, because you're husband and wife, your spouse is building a business together and working together, there would be triggers there. And those triggers came from the different things that you all did, but you nullified that by simply corresponding with each other through email.
Yes.
Wow. Yes.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty cool.
That's cool.
That is. Great. We're thrilled.
I can remember times, and Cedric and I we do work very well together now, but I remember a time when we couldn't do a home project together because it was like, no, I don't want to work with you. Alicia, you were talking about outlining the roles. And I think that not in business, yes, working together, yes, and understanding what each person does and what they bring to the table, because I think sometimes that's what creates those triggers. When we don't have that in business, if we don't have that, then it creates those triggers, because everybody wants to be the boss at the same time. Everybody wants to be instructing at the same time. Everybody wants to be in charge at the same time, or this is my idea, this is your idea, and that's clashing together. That's awesome. Those are two nuggets. Yeah. Definitely two nuggets for the TMC listeners that are working in business and building a business with your spouse. Maybe try to work email try sending emails instead of having a meeting, in-person meeting, if those triggers are coming up. And also outlining whose role is what. Those are some great tips.
That is good. That is good. I'm taking notes myself. Huh?
That's good. That's good.
The other piece I would add is to have it be, relationship is a big deal and it's very complicated, and the approach needs to be multifaceted. The folks need to deal with their psychology, or what we call their relationship blueprint, right? That's the second part, or the first part of our method actually, is the person really being conscious of their relationship blueprint. Then there's got to be that awakeness, that spiritual contact, if you will, that presence, whatever you want to call that. That's the second part, contact with your deeper self. The third part is masculine, feminine dynamics. She's got the turn on. I got a lot of stuff, but I don't have the turn on. She's a woman, I'm the guy, we're different. That difference creates some action, and masculine, feminine dynamics, super duper important. It may be a little cliche, but you watch any scene of James Bond with a woman, it's clear who the woman is, who the guy is, whether people are straight or gay or whatever. You just kind of want to have that, that polarity in the relationship. And then the other piece is the skills. Shante, you asked about that, the skills, knowing that different stages of relationship require different skills, and those skills are cumulative. And then the last part is the sex piece. It's got to be addressed. So it's relationship is a big deal. It's a lot more complicated than tennis. It means a lot more than tennis. So the approach needs to be very multifaceted.
Erwan, you mentioned one thing that I wanted us to talk a little bit about. You said the relationship blueprint. Could you tell us, how could someone start or just begin to figure out what their relationship blueprint is?
Yeah, they can inquire into, how did my parents relate with each other? And how did they relate with me? How did mom relate with me? How did dad relate with me? And how did they relate with each other? And then looking at all those pieces and kind of summarizing those pieces, they'll all be clues into, this is my relationship blueprint. Because my relationship blueprint is basically going to match how they related with each other, or how one of them related with me, or some combination of all of that. And then it takes the mystery out of, no wonder I always feel not seen by the other person, or victimized by the other person, or angry at the other person, or why I'm always avoiding the other person, or I'm always clinging to the other person. Those are examples of different relationship blueprints. So that material is discovered by looking at our relationship with each of our parents and their relationship with each other.
Guys, this is some awesome information.
Yes.
I thank you. And I know the TMC audience is just waiting for this question. If someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
So the best way to find out more about our work, about working with us, is to set up a free love life consultation with me. So this is available to those of you listening. It's a one-on-one conversation with me. It's totally confidential. We'll get personal. You can share with me all about your romantic life, questions you have, goals you have, challenges. And then if it looks like Erwan and I can support you further, I'll lay out the different options we have to work with people. We've got, like Erwan mentioned, the Mastery of Relationship, our most popular class. It's a group online class. We have private coaching and weekend intensives and all sorts of stuff. So to set up the Love Life consultation, there's two ways. One is you can text us. The number's 415-308-9580. That's 415-308-9580. You just text us, you mention the podcast, give me your name, say you want a consultation, and we'll set it up. And then I'll also give you guys a link that you can put in the show notes. People can click it and set it up. So this is could be a demarcation line in your love life, really to making the decision to get some skills and really look into what it is that you want in your romantic life and have us support you. So that's how you can set that up. Our website is pleasurecourse.com.
Erwan Alicia, on behalf of the TMC community, we want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us.
You two are awesome. We love you. Thank you.
So much fun. Thanks for having us.
We had a great time.
Yes, it was awesome.
If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified when we upload a video every week. And if you're listening on iTunes, rate the podcast and leave a review. That'll help us get the word out. And we want to invite you to head on over to our leadership podcast, Lead to Greatness, where my husband is interviewing entrepreneurs and great leaders every week.
So we want to thank you so much for joining us today on TMC. Looking forward to hanging out with you again on next week as we continue to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving. Bye. See you next week.